few hours before sunset in Seoul, Suga was seen leaving a familiar rehearsal building, dressed in a dark hoodie and a face mask he often wears when hoping to enjoy the day quietly without drawing too much public attention. While in his hand he carried a small box that was later identified as a personal gift for fellow musician Ae-denju, who was celebrating his birthday that day in a modest gathering at a private music studio owned by a well-known independent producer in the Hanam-dong area. And shortly after, Suga headed to the location in a private car accompanied by 2 trusted staff members, without heavy security or the feel of a grand ceremony, as the event was intentionally kept private with only a few invited guests from his close circle, including musicians and producers known for their underground collaborations and independent projects. And upon arrival, the atmosphere felt warm and intimate inside a room that wasn't too large but filled with handmade decorations. Old posters, amber-hued hanging lights, and soft acoustic music playing from small speakers in the corner. Then Suga joined a small circle of people sitting cross-legged on a thick carpet, enjoying warm coffee and toasted bread served by the studio's modest kitchen team. And in moments like these, there was no talk about big stages or tight schedules, but rather light conversations about creative processes, current music projects, and nostalgic memories of past collaborations, as Ae-denju is known as an experimental artist who has worked with major names beyond the mainstream. And Suga's presence added to the sense of familiarity since he too has occasionally engaged in non-commercial music projects purely for artistic satisfaction. Even when one of the guests started playing the guitar and performing an acoustic version of an old song they once created together, Suga was seen lightly smiling while tapping his fingers on the floor in rhythm, speaking very little but clearly immersed in the atmosphere. And although there was no official media documentation, several moments were captured using an analog camera owned by one of Ae-denju's friends known for his hobby of photographing small, quiet gatherings, with the photos kept for personal use as a tribute to the rare and informally planned meeting. Meanwhile, in the back kitchen, one of the staff was preparing a simple birthday cake made by a local chef from Itaewon, and when the clock struck 8 p.m., the cake was brought out. Without loud singing or cheerful shouts, just birthday wishes conveyed through hugs and smiles, followed by a session of listening to several unreleased demo tracks by Ae-denju, during which Suga briefly shared technical feedback about the arrangements and vocal tone, suggesting that the pieces had great potential if guided toward a darker and more minimal sound. And although the musical discussion lasted only a short while, it reflected that their relationship was not just personal but also rooted in mutual professional respect as fellow artists. And the evening quietly wound down as guests began leaving one by one around 10 p.m., with Suga being among the last to exit the studio, after helping tidy up some items on the table and politely saying goodbye to those still present, before stepping out into the cool night air, leaving behind no trace but the warm sentiment of a simple yet meaningful gathering. The following day, the atmosphere on Korean music fans' social media felt more relaxed than usual, as although there were no official posts from agencies or major outlets, several personal accounts within the independent music circle began sharing analog photo snippets with warm lighting and grainy details that captured quiet moments inside a studio room, including one image showing the side of Suga's face as he listened calmly to music while holding a cup, and another photo of Ae-denju cutting his birthday cake with a joyful expression, surrounded by familiar faces who rarely appear at major events or informal media coverage. And from these uploads, the public slowly realized that what had happened the night before wasn't a grand celebration but rather a small cross-artist gathering held without a formal agenda. And yet, the meaning of the event seemed even more profound because it unfolded in such an honest and unembellished setting, with a few young musicians who had attended sharing their own reflections through personal blogs or private accounts, describing how deeply they felt heard and respected by established names like Suga, who had shown up without maintaining distance or unnecessary formality. And that afternoon, Ae-denju himself was seen at a small cafe not far from the studio, sitting at an outdoor table with 2 friends while carrying a worn music notebook, likely continuing discussions from the night before, while inside the cafe, a barista who knew him well served drinks without needing to be asked, reflecting the close ties between independent musicians and the local creative community. And not long after, a studio staff member arrived with an envelope containing printed analog photos from the previous night, which they began flipping through with small laughs, recalling the simple moments that had just taken place hours ago. And during their chat, There was no talk of promotional strategies or upcoming major projects, but rather conversations about sustaining a genuine spirit of artistry without becoming trapped by industry pressures, and about the importance of having spaces like the night before, where they could just be themselves. And though such things may seem ordinary, they serve as rare meeting points amidst busy schedules and the demands of entertainment life. And while Suga himself wasn't seen at the location that day, several sources mentioned that he had returned to his usual routine by attending a private rehearsal session with his music staff, maintaining the balance between public life and personal privacy that he has consistently upheld. And behind it all, the small event from the previous night had left a lasting impression on many who were present, not just because of who attended, but because of the atmosphere they created together, without pressure, without flashing cameras, and without the need to perform anything beyond sincere presence. And this story quietly spread not as a sensational headline, but as a quiet glimpse into the lives of artists choosing to celebrate friendship and creativity in their most natural form, becoming a moment of reflection for many fans who realized that beneath all the glamour and popularity, there are deeply human sides these artists continue to nurture quietly and consistently. On the following day, still within the calm atmosphere that lingered after Adenju's quiet birthday gathering, several fellow musicians who had attended the studio began resuming their daily routines. Some returned to their own rehearsal spaces, while others gathered at a small community music hub, typically used for idea exchanges or impromptu recording sessions. And from stories that flowed organically through private channels, it became clear that the night at the studio had sparked both emotional and creative momentum for many of them, especially because it's rare to find spaces where music can be discussed without the pressure of numbers or marketing strategies. And amid these continuing activities, Suga was reported to have returned to one of the production rooms near Yeoksamdong to complete a mixing session for an internal music project he was working on, not under any formal announcement, but simply as part of the steady rhythm of his life. And in between, a young producer who had also attended Adenju's event wrote a short post on his personal account, stating that the atmosphere that night reminded him music doesn't always need to be flawless, it just needs to be honest and present in its most simple form. And that reflection quietly circulated among younger musicians, showing that what took place in that dimly lit room without any spotlight had left echoes that didn't disappear overnight. Even Adenju himself was seen returning to the studio that evening, this time accompanied only by a sound engineer and a close friend who helped organize the cables and small equipment used during the previous night's gathering. The studio still carried the same vibe, with the lingering scent of coffee in the kitchen, and the soft lights still hanging low, giving the sense that time hadn't fully moved on from the celebration. And as they slowly restored the space to its original setup, they also replayed several demo tracks that had been shared the night before, now listening with fresh notes and some follow-up ideas sparked by feedback, particularly from Suga, who, while not offering direct instruction, had made a significant impact through short but constructive comments. And in that quiet setting, there was no urgency to finish anything quickly. Everything moved slowly, aligned with the natural pace rarely afforded in the fast-moving entertainment industry. And that's what made spaces like this feel important, not only as work environments but also as places for recovery and rediscovery of creative purpose. And as night fell once again over the city, there were no after-parties or large follow-up gatherings, only simple activities that extended the energy from the previous evening. And gradually, the story of that small studio gathering spread more widely, not through major headlines or viral campaigns, but through quiet conversations between peers, warm personal posts, and lasting impressions carried by those who had been present. And from this, it became evident that sometimes the most unplanned moments offer the largest space to be fully present as human beings, without the concern of impressions or image, just being there and meaningfully involved. As the week continued without disruption, the quiet ripples from Adenju's small birthday gathering gradually settled into the background of everyday life. Yet the mood it left behind continued to influence those who had taken part, not through grand statements or flashy gestures but through subtle shifts in tone and energy within their daily routines. And for Suga, the days that followed seemed to return smoothly to a familiar rhythm, spending time in the studio, engaging in ongoing projects, and maintaining the quiet discipline that has long been part of his artistic process. While for Adenju, the post-birthday days involved reconnecting with collaborators who had attended the celebration, holding brief meetings in cafes, and exchanging early demos through private folders shared among trusted peers. not as part of a production timeline but as a continued extension of creative conversations that had naturally sparked that night and across small corners of the independent music. Seen in Seoul, a few artists began referencing that gathering as a rare moment of creative clarity, where the boundary between personal and professional blurred just enough to create an honest space for reflection, and this sentiment even surfaced subtly in new lyrics, track notes, and online journal entries shared quietly with their respective audiences. And while the public focus remained largely fixed on larger events in the entertainment world, a few attentive fans picked up on these small ripples, recognizing the tone of sincerity that had emerged from a space where there had been no press coverage, no stage lighting, and no need for validation beyond the presence of one another. And during one late afternoon, Adenju was seen visiting a local vinyl shop, exchanging a few quiet words with the owner and flipping through the jazz section, perhaps searching for new inspiration or simply enjoying a pocket of time away from screens and deadlines. And meanwhile, one of the musicians, who had attended the gathering, uploaded a field recording of city sounds mixed with minimal piano, captioned only with the date of the event. No hashtags, no explanations, which resonated with a small but attentive group of listeners who appreciated the understated tribute. And in moments like this, it became clear that what happened that evening was never meant to be a spectacle, but instead something that lived on gently through creative echoes and quiet gestures. And for Suga, whose career has spanned everything from massive stages to personal studio spaces, participating in such a gathering seemed less like an appearance and more like a return. A reminder of where creativity often begins, in silence, in trust, and in the company of people who value the process more than the product. And as time moved forward, there was no official statement, no compilation video, no retrospective post from anyone involved, just the ongoing work of artists who had taken a brief moment to slow down, together, breathe, and carry forward the kind of energy that doesn't need to be announced to be felt. And in the end, the story of that quiet evening found its place not in headlines, but in the quiet corners of people's memory, in the pause between two songs, in the small studio rooms where music still begins with a shared nod and a steady heartbeat.